So we're going to go ahead and call the Senate Committee on Revenue to order. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Senator Buck, Senator Nanyate, Senator Severs-Gansert, Senator Spearman, Chair Neal.
Here. So please mark Senator Gansert present as she walks in, and mark Senator Nanyate absent excused. I'm going to give you guys the lay of the land for today. So we're going to hear two bills. The order is going to be SB 430 and then SB 429. Then we're going to recess for work session and then hear SB 444. The reason why we're doing it that way is because Senator Dunyate is in Health and Human Services, and we're trying to manage our week as we're in deadline. So with that, I am going to make sure your phones are on silent. And now I'm going to call Senator Hammond to the table to present SB 430.
All right, that works. You can call me Senator Hansen, but if you do, fair warning, I will talk about guns for an hour.
I apologize. It's because his bill is on my mind and I was talked about in the hallway. I'm sorry.
No worries. Well, Madam Chair, it's great to be here in front of you and your committee. I appreciate your committee's indulgence on this bill. This particular bill is a bill that was brought to me by a constituent, a long-time resident. She actually served in the Silver-Hair legislature for me in my district for many years. She had called and asked about helping out seniors and helping out especially in terms of rent and or property tax. In particular, she is 86, her husband 93 at the time. Her husband passed away about a week after she actually called me and asked me to help out. And so I thought, well, I know this bill isn't going to help her in particular, but it will help out many of the people that she serves, as she is engaged often in many causes. So the LCB had talked to me about a particular program that had existed several other times, and so I'll just present the bill to you, and then I'll stand for any questions you may have. The legislature, for the record, this is Senator Scott Hammond, representing District 18 down in Las Vegas. The legislature in Senate Bill 31 of the 1973 session created the Senior Citizens Property Tax Assistance Act because, as the bill's legislative declaration would note, it was the public policy of this state to provide assistance to its senior citizens who are carrying an excessive residential property tax burden in relation to income. The act created a program that allowed a person aged 65 or older who met certain eligibility requirements relating to their income in the home's assessed value to apply to the Nevada Tax Commission for a refund of property taxes equal to 7% of the person's household income, but not to exceed the lesser of the property tax paid, or $300. Again, this is 1973. The provisions of the act also allowed a senior citizen who did not own their home to claim a rebate based on the rent that they paid. The act deemed the property tax to be paid to be 15% of the total rent that was paid by that senior in a year. Again, that senior could apply for a refund in an amount equal to 7% of the person's household income, but not to exceed the lesser of 15% of the rent paid, or $300. The money used to pay the refunds was through legislative appropriation. Senate Bill 31 would include general fund appropriations in the amount of $1.2 million per year for fiscal year 74 and fiscal year 75 in order to provide these refunds. It's fun to talk about something that old. The program's administration would be transferred to the Department of Taxation upon its creation in 1975, and in 2001, Senate Bill 574 would transfer the administration of the program from the Department of Taxation to the Aging Services Division of the Department of Health and Human Services. As a result of the Great Recession, the legislature in Senate Bill 423 of the 2011 session chose to eliminate this program based on a recommendation made in the governor's executive budget that session. The program would be briefly restored following the 2015 session. Senate Bill 514 contained an appropriation of $5 million to the Aging and Disability Services Division of DHHS for fiscal year 2016 to implement the program, which would be conducted by the division towards the end of calendar year 2015. Senate Bill 430 would create a program to provide relief to Nevada's senior citizens once again. To be eligible for the refund program in this bill, the applicant must meet the following requirements. He or she must be at least 55 years or older. His or her household income must be at or below the federal poverty level. The home must have been owned and used as the primary residence, or the applicant must have been continuously renting their home since July 1st of the year prior to the filing of the claim. The claimant or his or her spouse may not own real property other than the property claimed as their home with an assessed value of $40,000 or more. The home of the claimant and his or her spouse may not have been purchased for more than $500,000. And finally, the claimant and spouse must not have liquid assets of $180,000 or more. If a claim for a refund is approved, the homeowner may receive an amount equal to 50% of the accrued property tax or $1,000, whichever is less. If the claimant is a renter, he or she may receive an amount equal to 8.5% of the rent paid that year, up to $1,000. Section 18 of the bill allows a claim for a refund to be filed with the assessor of the county in which the home is located between February 1st and April 30th of each year. The county assessor is required under the bill to process the application, determine the assessed valuation of the property to which the claim applies, and then submit the claim to the division, who is then required to approve or deny the application and pay the refund no later than August 15th. Section 31 of this bill creates the Senior Citizens Property Tax Assistance Account in order to pay the claims and other expenses relating to the account. Aside from the appropriations from the state general fund, the account will also receive funding directly from each of the 17 counties based on an amount to be determined by the legislature to be expended from the account for each of the counties. This funding, in addition to the payment of the refunds, is also used to pay a $4 fee to the county assessor for each application processed and submitted to the division. Finally, Section 32 of the program specifies that the bill becomes effective upon passage and approval of the purposes of adopting regulations and on January 1st, 2024 for all other purposes, which would allow the counties to begin receiving applications for the program. And since I introduced the bill, I've had a few conversations with folks. Matter of fact, the Department of Aging, they basically said that they had a very large fiscal note placed upon the bill. They believe that the fiscal note could be relieved if we actually sent the administration part down to the counties and had the counties then administer the program. I'm amenable to that. As a matter of fact, I think that's probably a good idea since they do a lot of that there. And so I would propose that as a sort of a conceptual amendment here today as well. But that's pretty much it. If there's any questions, I'll stand for any questions. And by the way, if you haven't noticed, the acoustics in here is much better than almost any other room in the whole place. So it makes me sound good.
Thank you for that. Any questions? No questions? Oh, I'm like, I have at least 5. Okay, so then I will start it off then. So in section 5, line 24, where it includes the residential facility for groups, and actually, and sub D on page 3, what did you envision in including them? Because the way I interpreted residential facilities could be I guess, a long-term living facility or a care facility. So can you address that, and then we can address D?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So that's exactly my question. So I went, I think we were talking about NRS 449, And so I did look that up to make sure, and of course I didn't bring the computer down with me, but that's exactly what it was. It's talking about long-term care. It does not include things like a family who brings in one of their loved ones, an aging father or mother or something like that. It actually is a residential home of some sort that you're paying for. So, for example, we just had a 96-year-old aunt who passed away, but she was at a home where she was paying for that residential care. She had her own apartment inside there, and I think that that's exactly what it contemplates.
Thank you for that. But they're typically corporate structures. So are you intending to allow this this exemption to apply to a corporate entity?
No, the intent is not a corporate entity. I'm sorry, for the record, Senator Hammond. No, that's not my intent. And if there is language in that it suggests that, it's not my intent is to give a corporate entity a rebate of any kind. This is for individuals. The claimant has to be somebody who owns that house. Well, I think that we can tighten the language if need be, but that's not the intent at all, no.
Okay. And so on sub D, which is the Housing Authority, which is chapter 315, I just wondered how that would work. I guess tell me how you envision that working, because the way I understood it, that could be a Section 8 home, and I just assumed that in a Section 8 home that became a part of the Housing Authority, that they either were an LLC or they created some other kind of structure for themselves in order to come into the Housing Authority as homes, because I'm assuming that they were trying to cover themselves against liability and other things that, on top of the fact that they also get a rent subsidy to house a person. So can you talk about that?
Again, this is Senator Hammond for the record. This was part of the original program, and so I hadn't gone down under this program very far. It's not my intent to give that kind of a rebate to somebody, especially an agency like that. I think what was contemplated was if somebody is paying rent, they're in a housing project in which they are paying rent and they meet the standards, then they would still be eligible for it. But other than that, it's not the intent of at least my thoughts in making sure that somebody gets a county government or the state government gets a break on that, because that's not what we're trying to do.
Okay, thank you for that. Members, any questions? It's Senator Ganser, then Senator Spearman, and then I'll come back to myself.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. So the way that I was reading this is that's the residential facility for groups and also the dwellings within a housing project is the definition of home. And so I think who applies for it is the people who live in what was defined as a home. But I too am concerned about section 5(2)D, where you have subsidized housing, so the individual in the home isn't paying rent potentially, and then they would be eligible for a refund. So maybe that part needs to change. And then I think the chairwoman asked most of the other questions that I had. And then you said that you thought the fiscal note would be pulled from this?
If I can go directly, Madam Chair, to Senator Ganser, this is Senator Hammond for the record. I would not want to speak directly for the agency. I'll let them speak for themselves, but I believe that they would be able to remove a significant portion of the fiscal note if we were to make that change. And then, of course, the counties would probably come in and say, exactly where they would have to be on. We'll get information as to how much it would cost them to administer the program. But to your question of D, I definitely want to work that so it reflects what we were trying to do, and that is we're going back to the definitions in section 2 and I think 3. If you give me a moment, we really want to make sure that we're giving the refunds to what is the claimant in section 4.
Right.
I want to make sure that we're
Yeah,
hitting
section
the
4's
homeowner.
claimant.
Yeah, we want to make sure that it's hitting the section 4 part, which is the claimant, somebody who is actually the homeowner and or somebody who's renting.
Right.
So we can tighten that up as well.
And then there was some language in here that talks about the amount that is eligible potentially to be refunded, the 50%, would have to be a portion of the rent that is attributed to the property tax. And I'm not quite sure how you figure that out, if the landlord would have to say, well, if your rent's $1,000, $200 is because of the property tax. So I'm not sure how to refine that.
This is Senator Hammond to Senator Gansert. I believe we will allow that to be part of the regulations they put in, how they would calculate that.
Okay.
And there is a whole section on allowing the entity who administrates it to come up with appropriate regulations. And I think that's exactly it. It's a good place to start. Is how would they assess that?
Thank you.
Yeah.
And then, let's see, I had one more question. Oh, what was the historic? Do you have the historic numbers from when we did have this in place? What type of, like the number of claimants who received funding and how much that would have been? And is the $1,000 the same level as it was years ago? No.
No, Senator Hammond, for the record, to Senator Gansert, or Severs Gansert, sorry. No, I don't have the numbers, what it was before. As I put in the original statements at the beginning of the bill presentation, it was like $300 in 1973, 74, and so it was much lower. And I've had discussions already, if you can imagine people talking to me on the way down here, that perhaps $1,000 might be too high. Again, my ultimate intent is to help out our senior population. It seems like in this building we tend to find ways to help out a lot of populations, but it always seems like our seniors get passed over, and seniors and sometimes veterans for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
And so I really would like to see something in the realm of helping them out, even if it's not $1,000, it's some portion, and I'd be willing to talk about what that is, because we talked about the poverty level but not exceeding $1,000. So if we want to talk about half of that, I'm fine with that as well. I can have that discussion, but I just want to put something in place that helps out seniors.
Thank you. And I agree. Seniors, we don't always address them, and they are oftentimes on the most fixed incomes because they may not be working at all, right? So they rely on Social Security or other fixed income, so it's very difficult. So thank you.
Yeah, and to your point, Senator Severs Gansert, this is Senator Hammer for the record. Another thing that I was more than willing to budge on is, in the bill we put 55 years of age. We can always move that up. We'll have discussions on that too, because I really want to try to hit, if we have a limited amount of resources, money, we want to make sure we hit those that probably are hit the hardest, those who have already gone into retirement and are definitely below the poverty level and are in fixed income. So if we need to move that up so that we can retain some of that money for those folks, then I'd be willing to do that as well.
Thank you for that. So Senator Spearman has a question, but Senator Hammond, can you speak into the mic? We have some members that it's difficult for them to hear right now, so.
Senator Neal, this is Senator Hammond. Is this better?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, I'll just get closer. I'll swallow the mic, as they say.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I had a question on Section 8, it's page 3, and if you start at line 17, income means adjusted gross income as defined in the Internal Revenue Code and includes, and you come all the way down to line 23, it says veterans, pensions, and compensation. And so that is included. One of the things that, if you're talking about retirement, that's one thing, but if you're talking about disability payments, that's another. And I know there's something up here that says, it excludes the part about disability, but I just need to be clear on that so that it's not something we're looking at that's going to actually hurt veterans.
Senator Hammond, for the record, to Senator Spearman, I will get a hold of those who put this together and make sure it does not include the disability payment that you're talking about, and it only includes the veterans' pensions and compensations, but I'll clarify that for you and get back to you if I could.
Okay, thank you for that. So I have a question, just two final questions on Section 15 and then one from Section 20. So in Section 15, this is the rent section where the clarifies that the amount of the refund provided must be an amount equal to that portion of the rent, which is rent deemed to constitute accrued property tax. I guess I'm wondering, because it has two parts in that section, how many people fall into this category of federally designated under the poverty level that we're probably going to serve with the bill?
Senator Hammond, for the record, to the chair, Senator Neal. Of course, you'd ask me that question about that particular area because you were watching me as I was reading it on the floor, and you saw that I put in my notes, don't understand, break this down later. And that was only an hour ago.
Didn't see that. I actually didn't
You
see
saw
Senator.
that, and
I
so-
didn't all right, scratch that question.
No, I will ask that question, though. I will get to the bottom of that. And of course, this will change, though, as we have negotiations and decide whether or not we're going to keep it at 55. Or I actually feel more comfortable moving it up to at least 65, to be honest with you. And so that number would change as far as, how many people fall in that category. That'll change a little bit as we move that up.
So, did you have a sticky on section 20?
No, I don't. Yeah, go ahead. What is the question on 20?
Oh, on section 20, so in sub 1, it's talking about that the claimant or the spouse who owns the real property, which has an assessed value of more than $40,000. So the way I guess I'm interpreting it is that this is somebody that might have a build onto their property. Is that how you're seeing it?
This is Senator Hammond, for the record. Yeah, I was reading that. Of course, this is in the section that talks about how they can deny a claimant, and a claim, actually. And so they want to make sure that the person who is the claimant, that this is their this is their residence, right? That it's not going to be on another property, another home or another, outbuilding, as they might say, on a large property. And so I think that this is on their residence. So it doesn't really matter if it's an add-on. If it's their personal property and it's worth a certain amount, then that's what they're going to assess.
Okay. Thank you for that. Honestly, Senator Hammond, I didn't see that sticky, or else I wouldn't have set you up like that. Maybe somebody else, but I wouldn't have done it to
I'm
you.
sure everybody here believes everything you're saying, because I'm the bad guy now.
Yeah, all right. Senator Buck.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As far as looking at, let's see, I have to see what section it is. Section 19, or I'm sorry, 20, section 20. Would the counties need a person verifying assets, or which agency is going to verify assets? How do they go about that and prove liquid assets?
Senator Hammond, for the record, to Senator Buck. Yeah, the county is going to have somebody designated, and of course, you asked the question. As soon as you asked, it escaped my mind, but it would be the assessor, actually, who would look at all that stuff. We believe that, again, we're going to talk a little bit later on, probably being in a, like I said, the conceptual amendment is to push the administration of the program down onto the counties, and that would be probably the most likely person to administer is the county assessor, the person who's already looking at the property tax, and then they would make that that determination if they check all the boxes, because again, Section 20 sort of begins this is the process if you get denied. This section that was brought up a minute ago by Senator Spearman, we were talking about what are the revenues that are included. They would have to look at all that and then make the determination of whether or not they fit that criteria, but it would be the assessor most likely.
All right, thank you. I like the gist of the bill. I just worry a little bit always, when government looks at liquid assets or a person's wealth. So just wanted that on the record. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Buck. Senator Hammond, if I could address that. I mean, I understand that. Of course, I think the claimant is opening themselves up when they say, I'd like to make a claim, I'd like to apply, right? That's what the claimant is here. The definition is an applicant. And so as soon as they apply, they're basically saying, I'll open myself up to this if I can get this credit. So I think it's voluntary. So I'm okay with that, but I agree with you in principle.
So I don't think there are any additional questions, so we will open up for support for SB 430.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thanks. Is there anyone in Carson City for support of SB 430? Is there, BPS, is there anyone on the phone line for support of SB 430?
Yeah, there are no callers willing to testify in support at this time.
Is there anyone in Vegas for SB 430? Okay, is there anyone in opposition for SB 430 in Carson City?
Thank you, Madam Chairman and members of the committee. For the record, Mary Walker, representing Douglas County, Lyon County, and Story County. The concern that we have, and we appreciate this bill coming forward, and we would like to work with Senator Hammond on it, but our concern, and I'll use Lyon County as an example. Lyon County, 35% of their entire population is over 55. So we could be talking a significant amount of money, a lowering of the property tax revenues for them. And it amounts to about 22,000 people. So we are concerned about that. If you just take $1,000 and you have 1,000 people, that's a loss of $1 million. And some of these smaller counties, it's not clear to me in the bill exactly how the counties would be paying the state. It sounded like in the past that this program was actually funded by the state through the budget, and it wasn't funded by the counties, but I'm not quite sure about that. But we are concerned about that, not only for our smaller counties, but also for our school districts, that all you know how difficult our school districts are, the financial difficulties that we're having in the rurals. So with that, we'll be working with the sponsor and see, what we can do, but we are concerned about the financial impacts. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Anyone else in Carson City in opposition to SB 430? BPS, is there anyone on the phone line in opposition?
Testify in opposition of SB 430, press star 9 to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers willing to testify in opposition at this time.
Thank you for that. So is anyone in neutral for SB 430 in Carson? Is there anyone in neutral in Las Vegas on SB 430? Is there anyone on the phone line in neutral for SB 430?
Testify neutral to SB 430, press star 9 to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers willing to testify neutral.
Okay, thank you for that. So Senator Hammond, would you like to have any closing remarks? No? Okay, so we will close the hearing on SB 430 and open up the hearing on SB 429. Is Senator Flores? Come on down. So what we will do is recess until Senator Flores comes down for SB 429. All right, so we are coming out of recess, and we will open up the hearing on SB 429.
Good afternoon, Madam Chairwoman and esteemed colleagues of the Revenue and Economic Development Committee. I am Senator Edgar Flores, proudly representing Senate District 2. I am joined today by our amazing former Lieutenant Governor, Kate Marshall, who, besides having served this country honorably for such a long time, is also going to be co-presenting with me, as she has made herself a subject matter expert on today's topic. I appreciate everybody's indulgence in allowing me to present Senate Bill 429. And I have some prepared remarks that I'd like to go through. I will afterwards walk you through a section by section of Senate Bill 429. And then afterwards, I'll hand over the conversation to Kate Marshall so that she may provide some subject matter expertise along with important data that will really kind of drive home the importance of this conversation today. So first, I'd like to say Senate Bill 429 takes a Nevada approach that is both pro-growth and pro-family by adding a paid family leave incentive to our current economic development incentive structure. By adding paid family leave to Nevada's incentive structure, we will be able to attract those businesses with an employee-centered culture to support Nevada's goal to attract, retain, and grow jobs that are of high quality here in the state. Nevada no longer needs to position itself in a place of desperation, begging for companies to come here, willing to give any and all to close a deal. At the same time, Nevada is a business-friendly state that also knows how important it is to grow our workforce and support our families. Senate Bill 429 combines these goals to reward companies and support families. Unlike the 13 states and the District of Columbia that have enacted paid family leave laws, Senate Bill 429 uses a carrot instead of a stick to attract the right companies for Nevada. By pairing Senate Bill 429 with federal tax credits not available to such companies in the above states, and there's a list of 13 of them that I won't read off, but what we're doing with Senate Bill 429 provides an incentive for companies that already provide paid family leave to relocate to Nevada and obtain not only federal tax credits, but also Nevada tax abatements. If I could just flesh that out a little bit better. What we're saying here is there is a federal tax credit presently that exists for businesses that offer paid family leave. However, in order for that benefit, for that tax credit to apply, it must be in a state where they don't already mandate paid family leave. In other words, if state A has enacted a statewide law that mandates paid family leave, and a company offers paid family leave, they're not entitled to that federal credit because what the federal law says, well, you already have to do that, so we're not going to give you the credit. What we're saying here is that now Nevada is going to position itself to look at these companies that are engaged in best practices and protections for our employees and benefits for our employees and say, you already do that. Come to Nevada, and on top of getting the abatements that we offer in this amazing state, you're also going to now be entitled to that tax credit at the federal level. Also, so I'd like to walk you just very quickly through what the bill does on a section-by-section breakdown, and then I'll hand it over. So, on page 5, line 11 through 15, it adds new provision that requires go-ahead to determine that an applicant for abatements have a policy for paid family and medical leave for those employees who have been employed for at least 90 days. Such leave is required to be 12 weeks paid at a rate of at least 55% of the regular wage of the employee. Page 5, lines 16 through 34 of the bill requires the applicant to go ahead to agree in writing that the business will not prohibit, interfere with, or otherwise discourage the employee from taking paid family medical leave and references the federal FMLA Act. Page 5, lines 28 through 29, specifies that an applicant's paid family medical leave will also cover leave for the care of an adult child, sibling, or domestic partner of the employee. And page 5, lines 41 through 43, adds an additional requirement that GOED consider whether an applicant has a policy of paid family and medical leave for its employees when determining whether such applicant shall be approved for an abatement. Joining us today in the gallery is my family and some good friends, and I reference them because they are small business owners. They made the journey today to Carson City. They own restaurants, they own event centers, they work in grocery chains, they do a whole host of other things. I myself also have a group of 15 employees who relies on us to take care of them. And I mention us because we didn't get any abatements, and we understand the importance of family medical pay. We know that we have an obligation to take care of folk. It is what Nevadans do. It's what good, strong, small businesses do. And we just do it because it's a best practice. It's how we retain and take care of our workforce. What we're saying through this bill is that if we're attracting businesses to Nevada, that we're also attracting businesses that are like-minded. Anecdotally, I have not had a conversation with any industry in Nevada that has not indicated that they're having a hard time hiring people. And there is a whole host of reasons for that. And as our former lieutenant governor will speak to, you'll learn that a lot of that is just because we're not offering the best possible benefits and retention packages for some of our employees. I do want to put on the record that I had an opportunity to converse with GOED, and it's important that I be abundantly clear that they express some concerns, that they understand what we're trying to do and respect that, but however, there was concerns with this bill, and out of full transparency, I wanted to put that on the record. With that, Madam Chair, I'd like to now hand over the presentation to Kate Marshall.
Thank you. Kate Marshall, for the record, Senior Advisor to the Impact Project on behalf of the Hopewell Fund. I wanted to make sure that you understood, first off, what kind of businesses we're talking about here. We are really, if we're talking about Clark and Washoe, we're talking about attracting businesses that are already going to employ 50 employees or more, and that are already going to make $1 million capital investment in Nevada. So we are not talking about the mom and pop entity down the street, and we're trying to attract those businesses here. So let me go over the federal tax credit so that you have an understanding of what that is. That the federal, it's IRS code section 45S. It will extend from 2017 through 2025. And what it says is that they'll provide a tax credit for employers who provide paid family and medical leave to their employees. And you understand that a tax credit is not the same as a deduction. It's a direct credit, so it's the exact amount of money. It's not based on the percentage of taxes that you pay. This particular credit, paid family leave cannot be required by the state. If it is, you don't get the credit. It has to match what FMLA is. So it is not some other kind of leave, it's FMLA leave. And it must be, the credit must be for at least 50% of the wages paid to the employee during the time that they are off. You'll see in this bill that it's 55%, and part of that is to match up, right, with the federal tax credit. Okay, so the first thing is, why does that matter to Nevada? Why does it matter, and why do we want to attract those kinds of companies here? And to walk you through that, the first thing I want to do, can I do this? Will I do this? Ha, okay. You should see right now on your screens a chart from the Federal Reserve. This is from the Federal Reserve in St. Louis. It was published in February of 2023. This is Nevada's labor force participation rate. What it means is that for those individuals, men and women, age 25, actually through 70, because the Federal Reserve knows that there are people that are over 65 are working, how many of those people who are in that age group are actually working in Nevada? And what you see in this chart is you see that over time, that rate has dropped. If you look at, if you see on the chart the high, not the high, but if you look at July of 2008, you'll see it was about 70%. That's, you see that big thick line? That's right to the left of that. That's July 2008. It was about, it's almost in the middle of the page. It was about 70%, and today, or as of February of 2023, it was 61.8%. Now, if you want to compare that to the national average is 62.5, meaning that Nevada has less labor force participation than the national average. Now, there's lots of reasons for that, and we're not here today to talk about all the reasons why labor force participation is declining. What we're here to talk about is, are there things that Nevada can do to increase our labor force participation? I was recently at an event where the Reno Sparks Chamber was speaking, and they made the comment that in Nevada right now, for every person who is looking for a job, there are 3 jobs available. So I think, I don't think it's news to anyone here that we have a situation in Nevada right now where our businesses are desperate to find people who will work. So how can we do this in a way that is both pro-growth and pro-family? Can we attract the right companies here who will help us with this chart? And that's what we're going to talk about today. If you look at, I went and looked up the data for what if we're just talking about women, okay? Because paid family leave often affects women with young children. So if we're talking about women, the participation rate in Nevada is 55.7, and the national average is 56.8. So what that tells you is that we have room to grow in Nevada, that we have working women who are not working, working age women who are not working right now in Nevada. That might help us with that chart. Okay. Paid family leave not only increases women participation in the workforce, it supports women who want to work and have a family. For these reasons, such an incentive will make a big difference. In a minute, I'm going to show you 2 slides that prove that. But what I want you to understand is that the research that I'm going to show you has documented that there are short-term benefits to women and families, right? The short-term benefit meaning I get paid family leave, I get to go home when I have a child and spend some time with that child. In addition, it is shown to reduce poverty and improve maternal and child health. However, the research also shows that there are long-term economic benefits, because when you offer paid family leave, women don't leave the workforce. Women don't leave the workforce. And in fact, if you look at which women are more likely to stay in the workforce, it's educated women, meaning that you have a higher skilled workforce. A higher skilled workforce. Further, when you offer that kind of job protection, it increases leave taking and benefits for individuals who may not be covered by family medical leave. All right, so now let me show you, because I can talk a good game, but let's look at the data, okay? I'm going to show you 2 states. These 2 states passed paid family medical leave. If you see on the chart, this is California. California passed paid family medical leave in 2004. If you look to the left of the red line is the day they passed it, you will see that there's 2 lines, and they're roughly parallel to each other. The top line, the blue line, is women without children. The red line is women with children. Now, as you would expect, women with children are less likely to be in the workforce. That's the gap between the 2 lines. This chart is women aged 25, or 25 to 54. So you saw in the federal chart it was more, right? It was people over 70. Sorry, it's dry. All right, so what happens when you pass paid family leave? Notice that the red line, all of a sudden, almost, it's getting very close to reaching the blue line. Those are women who have had children who are going back into the workforce. That's what that is. And in fact, the numbers are striking because what it shows is that prior to the implementation of paid family leave, 26 to 29% of participating women would leave the workforce. That's a quarter to a third in the year that they had a child. And 20% of the women would never, 20% who left the workforce would never return. However, when you have paid family leave, they're nearly closing the gap, and you have an increase of 20% return to the workforce in the birth year. And you have an increase of up to 50% return in 5 years after birth. Let me show you the next chart. This is New Jersey. So New Jersey passed their law in 2009. Again, if you look to the left of the chart prior to the passage of the law, you see women, blue line, women with no children. Red line, women with children, roughly parallel, right? Past paid family medical leave, what happens? Women with children start being in the workforce. So go back, if we go back, how do I attract the right companies that are pro-growth, so we're a pro-growth state, and pro-family, that helps me increase the people in my state in the workforce so that my businesses can hire people and I'm attracting the right companies? Well, one way to do that, guys, is to have paid family leave as an abatement incentive. So if you offer in the 13 states that already require it, if you're offering paid family leave, you're already doing it, okay? Now, I don't want leftover companies to come here. I want good companies to come here. So come here, get the tax credit, the federal tax credit. When does Nevada able to say that? I'll give you a federal tax credit. I don't mind giving away federal money, do you? I can take the federal tax credit and I'll give you an abatement. So I just, one of the things that, some additional facts. I think if you said to a business, you're going to offer paid family leave, maybe the business says, well, wait a minute, is everybody just going to be like, always on leave, right? Well, in fact, that's not what the data shows. The data shows that when you offer paid family leave, not only do you increase women's labor market participation, but they end up working 10 to 17% more hours. For those of you who are moms, you know this. I don't even have to tell you this. Not only do you go back to work, but you work harder. Is this not true? And you still get dinner on the table. I don't know. Anyway, so not only do you increase working hours and labor force participation, but we're using a carrot that is both pro-growth and pro-family. And then if it's okay with you, if we can open it up to questions, please. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Any questions? Senator Spearman, Senator Buck?
Thank you all. So looks like a really good program. So the carrot is the federal tax credit. What if they come here and 3 years later they stop the program? Will there be any clawback provisions?
Kate Marshall for the record. Thank you for that question. So yes, under GoEd today, when they offer abatements, and this would be part of the abatement process, there are clawback provisions if you made certain you made certain promises, right? You signed off on certain obligations, and then you didn't go through with those obligations. I should add that, you want to talk about, well, would these companies come? So our most recent abatement opportunity was to Tesla, and Tesla offers paid family medical leave. Yeah.
Senator Buck.
Thank you, Chair. Are there any examples here currently in Nevada, aside from Tesla, who take advantage of the tax credit abatement? Any examples of companies that do that?
Kate Marshall, for the record, thank you for that question. I didn't do the research on what percentage of companies offer paid family leave here in Nevada. I just used the Tesla as an example of a company that offers paid family leave.
Because I guess I'm wondering, as far as mandating this or as offering that, they can do that anyway, right, as they come in? I'm sorry, I'm not really familiar with the whole federal aspect of that, but I just wondered how many companies are currently doing this without this, us mandating them to, or?
Yeah, Kate Marshall, for the record. Again, I'm sorry, through you, Madam Chair, to you, Senator Buck. So yes, but what we're trying to do here is to say, first off, we're not mandating. You don't have to take an abatement, right? It's a gift. It's a gift. So what we're trying to say is, what kind of companies do we want to attract here? And how can we attract those companies here? Well, one way is to say that it's a sweetener, right? So if you come here, you're going to get the federal tax credit anyway, but now I'm going to add the abatement because you do paid family leave. So you get a twofer in Nevada, and I can attract these companies. I can attract the creme de la creme companies from these other states. And I think, Nevada has turned the corner. I mean, we have the Golden Knights. Let's just be honest. We have turned the corner. We can say, look, you want to come to Nevada? We got a twofer for you. This is a place to be. We're going to offer good things to good companies that support our workforce.
And Madam Chair, if I may, Senator Edgar Flores for the record, and thank you, Senator Buck, for that question. I also think, assuming that in your question, let's just say, assume hypothetically, that all those companies who have taken advantage of this abatement do in fact offer FMLA. What we're doing is sending a very direct message to Nevadans. Again, an abatement is something that is not available to all small businesses. There's a whole host of folk that already do this. But by us saying that, we're also setting a kind of a minimum standard of what we expect when we're attracting folk here. And we're saying that to our employees. We're saying that to other small businesses who have done it without any support to that extent. And in the scenario that it's not happening, because I can't provide that data now, but in the event that it's not happening, we're giving direction. And Nevada is giving very clear direction on who it is that we want to bring into the state. And I think either one of those hypotheticals, without having the exact data, I think we're sending the right message. And we're attracting the best companies in this country to come here. And we're promoting growth and at the same exact time taking care of our families. And I think that's something that we shouldn't be compromising. We shouldn't have folks scouting business for who's going to invest the most without also contemplating who's going to take care of our employees and going to promote longevity for them as well.
And if I may, Chair, one more question. I was also wondering, what you showed the states that have enacted this. Do you have any examples from states that haven't done this? And I wonder where their lines converge.
Yeah. Thank you, Kate Marshall, for the record, through you, Madam Chair, to you, Senator Buck. So if you look on the chart, you'll see that there's 13 states. I just showed you 2, but if you look on the chart, you see that prior to enactment, the lines run basically parallel with a large gap. And after the enactment, they start to converge. So in states where there is not paid family leave, the lines run basically parallel with a large gap, right? Meaning that you don't have when women have children, they exit the workforce in decent numbers, and they don't come back. That's what the data shows. And let me, just to make sure that I say that correctly, I want to give you the data correctly. 1/4 to 1/3 of women who, when they have children, will exit the workforce. And after 5 years, you will still have 20% of women who have had children exit the workforce, they haven't returned. And in Nevada, what we saw is that the number's worse, right? We have less female workforce participation than the national average. And then we also have a workforce shortage. So it's a way for us to increase our workforce in a way so that we're still pro-growth and we're pro-family. So it helps both businesses and it helps families. Thank you, ma'am.
Any additional, Senator Gansert?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and welcome. Good to see you. Thank you for bringing this forward today. So I was going through some of the current statutes, and if you were to look at the current statute on healthcare, it gives a business who's either expanding or relocating here 8 quarters to establish their healthcare plan. And so they have a ramp-up period. And so that's my first question, is this expected day one, or is there a ramp-up period?
Kate Marshall, for the record. I think the way it's read is if you look at section I think it's 8 calendar quarters. But I don't, there's a lot of pages here, and I don't want to make
So I has, yeah, that's around the new employees. So actually, that's another good example. So if you look at E, if it's health insurance, you've got 8 quarters. If it's J, you've got 8 quarters. Excuse me, if it's I, it's 8 quarters, and that's the number of employees. If you look at J, it looks like it's from day one. So that might be something to consider if they don't already have an established plan, whether they need to do it within the first 8 quarters.
I guess, the thing is that we are trying to attract companies that already do this. So, right, so we're trying to take a company that does it in California, doesn't get the federal tax credit, Kate Marshall for the record, doesn't get the federal tax credit, and bring them here. So they'd already be offering paid family leave.
So maybe this could be, if you're going to do it, make it be dual. So you could have one that's not receiving it, and then you can say, if you don't already have it, you can have up to 8 quarters to be able to do it. Just a thought. And then you've got the 90 days. Is 90 days the same as federal, or is there a reason for that you have to be employed for 90 days? Because that seems pretty short to be able to turn around and give someone, up to 12 weeks.
Kate Marshall for the record, through you, Madam Chair, to you, Senator Sievers-Gansert. Yeah, very good point. So under federal law, it's 1 year, and under this provision, it's 90 days. So greatly appreciate you pointing out these opportunities. So, and thank you for that. Yeah.
Sure, because I think 90 days is too short probably for a lot of companies to be able, because you haven't really been there that long, right, to turn it around and give them potentially 12 weeks off. But I do recognize the importance of family medical leave, because I've had to use that before for a family member. So I do recognize the importance of that. And I know and then there's another question around the size. When you look at the abatements that they have, they're divided up. For smaller businesses, I think the investments as little as $250,000. It's 10 employees, 2 years, $250,000 investment, and then the other ones are like $1 million or so. And so have you considered whether this should be for the businesses that are in the larger bucket, not the smaller ones that may be very new, as far as, who will be required to have something like that? Because I also know that we've done a lot of work around businesses that are in their infancy that end up moving here. And they have very few employees, and I'm not sure that they could afford this, but you're right, with larger companies, when you look at a Tesla, in their case, they already had it, so they will have that, or maybe there are some larger businesses who haven't considered doing this, but would consider doing this. So that's the other thought, is the magnitude of the business that would be required to offer this type of benefit.
Kate Marshall for the record, through you. Okay. Senator Gansert, I really appreciate that question because it's an opportunity. And I want to point out two things. First, as Senator Flores said, you have a number of small businesses here today who already do that. Second, when you're lowering in GoEd, when they lower the number of employees and the number of capital investment, it's really dependent on what county you're going into and what the population of that county is. And so it raises the question of, do you want to say that if a company's going to a rural area, they don't have to do as much for people in the rural area as they have to do for people in Clark and Washoe? And if you're going to Fallon or you're going to Ely, those women are worth the same as if you're going to Reno or Clark, and they are equally as valuable, So I don't know. I think it's worthy of further discussion, but that's the other side of that issue, right?
So, if I may, I agree with you. The way the current statute is written, it's about the location of the business, and we do know, like, Tesla's in Story County, right? So it's a county that would fall into the small group, but actually they have totally different standards for that. But if you're in Tahoe Regional Industrial Center, you're actually in a small county. So I don't know if you want to consider some sort of threshold for businesses of certain magnitude, and maybe it has to do with employees. Like if you have 50 or more employees, because then they've got enough revenues to hire 50 people, so maybe they have enough to be able to afford this if they're going to be expanding or moving here. So just another thought, because you are right. It's about geography for the requirements that we currently have, not about the size of the business. And I know for a lot of other bills, when we've looked at expanding benefits, frequently we use the 50 or more, so maybe that's another idea. So thank you.
Yes, appreciate it.
Thank you for that. So I just have one question, and it's coming from Section 1. So I know currently under statute, GoEd can audit, right? They have that power once you enter into the agreement. I didn't see a specified time period. So how do you envision this provision working? In Section 1, you have this mandate that that the medical leave that it must be at a rate of 55% of the regular wage of the employee. They must give 12 weeks. And so ultimately, I guess in my mind, I envision that you're expecting them to do these things. And therefore, if they don't, then there would be some clawback by GoEd if they fail to perform in that area. So let's just take this for example. So if you have an abatement and it's going to run for 2 years, then, sales tax abatements run for 2 years. So what do you expect to happen in that 2 years when you've given this abatement to a company with you're expecting them to give the FMLA? When do you want GoEd to come in and audit to make sure that this is happening? How are you going to schedule or build this kind of audit procedure to make sure that the employees who get sick, who get pregnant, or whatever, are being covered by this employer who within that 2 years is functioning under an abatement?
Kate Marshall for the record. Thank you, Chairwoman Neal. Yeah, a very good question. So first off, it's a written policy, so it would have to be transparent to all employees that they had this benefit available to them. And second, GoEd has an audit schedule depending on what their incentives are, and then annually, I think it's annually, it could be biannually, they produce to the legislature their audit and all the companies they've audited and the status of those audits. So I presume that if they only offer 2 years of abatement, then it would fit into their audit schedule, but I don't want to speak for GoEd, but this would fit in with that. And the fact that it's a written policy, it is then transparent to the employees that they have this benefit available to them. So it's not like, yeah, they offer it, but you don't know about it, so good luck to you, right? Not like that, yeah.
And Madam Chair, if I may, Senator Edgar Flores, for the record, we are not intending to change the audit mechanism in place now. In other words, there are requirements now where you have to meet them. For example, we're talking about the threshold of 50, depending on the population of where we're serving, 50 full-time employees. That is something now GOAD needs to review and ensure that you in fact have created 50 full-time employees. Or if it's a smaller population or that there's an X amount of investment, whether it be 250,000 or $1 million. That's already in statute. Now, by us imposing this requirement, we are not suggesting that we want to change and or create a new layer of auditing. We are simply suggesting that we need to ensure that this also has to be followed. And I know in our proposed language, we also do have in that sub 1 and 2 where it talks about we want to make sure that they're not prohibiting or discouraging an employee from taking advantage of paid family medical leave. So there's things we put in statute to make sure that they're not doing that. And I'm assuming that in that scenario also an employee would say, look, I'm entitled to this. It hasn't been extended to me. So the employee would also raise the alarm. But whatever mechanism is in play now, we don't want to mess with.
Thank you for that. And I think maybe my statement's not clear because I am expecting maybe a little bit more auditing because I think it's different than a healthcare policy, right? I think it's entirely different if a company is getting MBT abated, sales tax abated, and then all of a sudden a pregnant mother or says, I want my 12 weeks of leave, and then X company doesn't give it. You're expecting them to act, I'm assuming, as a whistleblower to GOAD, and then say, company prohibited me, company prevented me. That range of employees that could happen over a cycle, right? Could happen over a month, it could happen over 3 months, where there could be a series of employees in several companies who allege, I didn't get my FMLA, right? I mean, I'm assuming, and I know you guys are like, we want the good companies. You're assuming you're not going to get the bad actor, but there are bad actors. And there are people who come in and get the abatements and then don't necessarily follow the rules. We've seen that already in the current abatements, right? We've had the conversation over and over and over again about companies who are currently receiving the abatement, and we've been arguing over, well, why are they on Medicaid, right? With the expectation you were going to give them a wage that prevented them from being on Medicaid, yet they have an abatement. So to me, there are more, I think, other than a yearly check or biannual check, this is something that I would want a closer look at, even if it was run as a pilot, just to get an examination on how is it working, how are these companies performing, because there are expansion and then there's existing. And so you want to court a business to come in and then say the carrot is offer this leave and then we'll give you this abatement for that. So I just think that people feel very strongly about FMLA. They feel very strongly about getting the leave to take care of their family, getting the leave to take care of a sick child, take care of a sick grandmother. And if a company fails to do this, I'm just wondering what's that length of time where they're acting as a whistleblower, going to GOAD and filing a complaint and saying, this didn't happen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senator Edgar Flores, for the record. If I could maybe backtrack, I think both, and I'm very confidently saying this, that if the request of the committee is for us to ensure that we have specific language and direction given to ensure that this is in no way violated by the employer, we are 100% on board. We will work with the committee to provide those parameters and safeguards. We're 100% there with you. But the only thing I will say is, even now in the hypothetical we posed, there could be a company A that comes to Nevada, creates the 50 full-time employment positions, and then at some point goes down to 40 and operates like that for X amount of months. Even in that hypothetical, it's just what I am saying is there's already scenarios now where there's things that can be happening, and I'm sure GOED is aware of this. And in that scenario, those employees who were dismissed would not raise their hand and say, wait a minute, we were at 50, now we're at 40, you're supposed to be at 50, it's been like this forever, or for X amount of months. I understand that we don't want to put the onus on the employee, but I'm saying even now, without us, should this bill not even move forward? I'm sure there's a whole host of hypotheticals where there may be employers who are not following this exactly as it should be followed. And so we are more than open to creating parameters in whatever way this committee sees fit, that we're following through with whatever requirements we're imposing on these businesses that hope to come in and take advantage of these abatements and become part of our community.
Okay, thank you for that. I only brought it up because we haven't been able to claw back the abatements on the Medicaid companies, right? So they're still experiencing and benefiting from the abatement regardless of the argument that we're making now, right? So once we put the carrot out there, it's very hard to pull it back because they always have excuses. They always have, well, next time we'll change, we'll do this. And you're like, yeah, and in the meantime, you're not paying taxes. So, and that's a problem in general. So, all right, thank you for presenting this bill. And we will go ahead and open up for support on SB 429.
Thank you, Madam Chair. David Goldwater, representing the Impact Project. My journey into economic development and redevelopment started as an elected official in this body. I had a constituent call me, and they asked me, what is going on with economic development? Why are you giving tax abatements to my competition? And I started to research what was occurring. And at the time, the statutes were very loosely worded. And at the end of the day, there was some offices in the Lieutenant Governor's office, ironically. And we were simply giving tax abatements to companies to come to town without any real criteria. Over the years, we've built that criteria up. This is, in this bill 429, is yet another criteria item to make sure that businesses that we attract to Nevada are at least on a level playing field with the businesses that are here, that are your constituents, that are employing your constituents. Think of it in these terms. If a company in Nevada is currently providing paid family medical leave, and they've been in business for 25 years here in Nevada, today we're going to use our tax dollars to attract a company from out of state to compete with these businesses that are not currently offering family medical leave. Not a good deal for our constituent businesses. I want to give a big compliment to the Governor's Office of Economic Development on this journey. That office has done a yeoman's job to attract and retain many different businesses from around here. And they use the tools that you give them. Back in the days when I was working on these issues, legislators would say, oh, why are you doing this? They'd go to the executive branch during these meetings and they'd be so miffed that we were offering these. And the answer really was, well, it's not, the legislature decides what the policy is going to be, what tools are the Governor's Office of Economic Development going to have? And then that office goes out and uses those tools to attract and retain these businesses, and they've done a great job. We are in competition with other states. There's a very cogent argument that says, oh, Don't restrict us. Don't make us less competitive with, say, other Western states like Utah or Arizona, even California to a certain degree. I say to you that this is not doing that. It's doing the opposite. At the core of Nevada's new economic development strategy is its people. Those aren't my words. Those are the words from the Governor's Economic Development Report 2023. This bill is about people. When we are in competition with Utah and Arizona, there are so many things that are apples to apples comparison of what we have in our toolbox versus what they have in their toolbox. We don't have an income tax. Utah does. Arizona does. We have access to roads, certain rail lines, maybe better access to a highway. It's just what we have to offer companies are unique to Nevada, and they're unique to Arizona, and they're unique to Utah. This bill is saying, care about these people. Offer this benefit if you want our money. And that is why I'm in support and happy to answer any questions about this bill.
Members, any questions? Okay, next.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Kennedy McKinney, here today on behalf of the Nevada Women's Lobby. The Nevada Women's Lobby believes in fighting for equity, choice, and opportunity for women and families throughout Nevada. We are here today in full support of SB 429, which will expand paid medical and family leave for employees by providing certain tax abatements as an incentive. We know that having paid family leave is essential in supporting working women and families. We urge the committee's support for this bill. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you for that. Is there anyone else in support of SB 429? Please come fill in the awesome 2 chairs. Yeah, I know.
Good afternoon, Chair Neal and members of the committee. My name is Brenda Zamora. That's BRENDA ZAMORA. I am here to speak as an individual. I have many roles in the community, but my favorite is being a mother to my 3 daughters. And bear with me if I start tearing up, okay? I became a mother at a young age. My first child arrived 10 weeks before her due date, which led to her to have many medical complications. The first few years were very difficult because I was a single mother with no job. Eventually, I finally had an opportunity to work and get on my feet. After a year of working at a local clothing store, I became a store manager. Things were going great. Unfortunately, my daughter got really sick and she was admitted to Sunrise Children's Hospital. She was hospitalized for 2 weeks before doctors diagnosed her with a blood disorder. At first, they had told me it was cancer, and I only share that just so you can get an idea where my mental space was at the moment. I then had to make a decision between working or staying with my child in the hospital room as her only parent. This isn't a decision parents should have to make. Fast forward 4 years later, and I have learned how powerful it can be to share a story that can create a change to help families. I have worked with many organizations locally and nationally in the fight for paid and medical leave for all. An emergency is never planned, but bills do not take a pause. I strongly urge you to support SB 429 to help families like mine. Thank you all.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. My name is Brianna Scamilla, and I'm here on behalf of Planned Parenthood Votes Nevada in support of SB 429 because paid family and medical leave benefits both workers and employers and keeps communities healthy and economically empowered. Not only does it keep valuable employees in their jobs when they have a child or a medical emergency, it also saves employers money by preventing turnover and loss of talent. Paid family and medical leave is crucial to Nevadans' ability to maintain healthy, financially secure, and full lives, and we should do all that we can to attract employers into our state who offer that leave. I also want to share that our partners at the Progressive Leadership Alliance of Nevada also support SB 429. They couldn't be here today, but they asked me to share that support with the committee. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Is there anyone else in support of SB 429? Come fill in the seats.
Good afternoon, Chair and committee members. For the record, my name is Matilda Guerrero, and on behalf of Battle Born Progress, we are in support of SB 429. Adding paid family leave as a requirement to obtain an abatement aligns with our economic incentives with our goal to attract the right companies for the Silver State. This can help employers recruit new, talented employees while also retaining their existing staff. In addition, paid family leave helps to keep workers safe and healthy on the clock while increasing productivity and decreasing employer costs. We're calling on this body to prioritize and empower working families, and this bill does exactly just that. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Is there anyone down south for SB 429 in support? BPS will go to the phone lines.
To testify in support of SB 429, press star 9 to take your place in the queue. Caller, last 3 digits, 729. Press star 6 to unmute yourself.
Hello, my name is Caroline Mello Robertson. Hi, my name is Caroline Mello Robertson. I'm the Southwest Regional Director for NARAL Pro-Choice America, and I'm here to register our support for SB 429 and thank the bill sponsor for carrying this. NARAL is a nonprofit advocacy organization with more than 48,000 members across the state of Nevada. We know that paid family leave is a critical component of reproductive freedom, and everybody deserves the dignity and financial stability that it offers. SB 429 makes important steps in moving Nevada forward to ensure everyone has access to paid family leave, and we urge this committee to pass it without delay. Thank you.
Chair, there are no more callers willing to testify in support.
Okay, thank you for that. So we will move to opposition for SB 429. Is there anyone in Carson City? Is there anyone in Las Vegas in opposition of SB 429? BPS, is there anyone on the phone line in opposition?
Chair, there are no callers willing to testify in opposition. Oh.
Madam Chair, I apologize. I would like to testify in opposition
Okay.
in Las Vegas.
Go ahead, state your name for the record.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Emily Osterberg. I'm with the Henderson Chamber of Commerce. And our concern is that this bill can apply to expanding business and not just new business. And because it creates additional government interference by requiring approval from agencies over the application process, it might deter other companies from coming to Nevada and expanding their business as well. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Any other opposition? Okay, so I will move to neutral for SB 429. Is there anyone in neutral in Carson City? Anyone in neutral in Las Vegas? Phone lines, BPS, is there anyone in neutral?
Chair, there are no callers willing to testify in neutral.
Okay, thank you for that. So I'll call the bill sponsor back up for closing comments.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senator Edgar Flores for the record. I first wanted to thank former Lieutenant Governor Kate Marshall for all her work and tremendous amount of research that she put into this bill. And I also just, while I appreciate the opposition's concerns raised, I wanted just to remind this committee that we are talking about abatements. Any small business can do whatever they please in this state, make whatever investment if they don't want to take advantage of this state's money. But if the people of Nevada are going to be a participant in this process through the abatement process, you're going to have an added layer of responsibility, and I think that's fair. And so with that, Madam Chair, again, I thank the entire committee for their time. Senator, I look forward to working alongside of you. Hopefully we can make some adjustments and work together. And Madam Chair, we look forward to doing the same with you in drafting out those parameters to ensure that nobody's taking advantage of this abatement process. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so we will close the hearing on SB 429, and we will go into a recess until HHS adjourns. All right, so we will come out of recess for Senate revenue, and I will turn over the mic to chairmanship to Vice Chair Dunyate. Okay. Senator Dina Neal, you want to open up the hearing?
Thank you so much. I'll go ahead and open the hearing on Senate Bill 444, which revises provisions relating to excise tax on live entertainment. Chair Neal, please proceed.
Thank you. Senator Dina Neal here to present SB 444. There is a conceptual amendment, proposed amendment mock-up. Hopefully everyone has it, and then there's a chart. So I'm just going to lead off with some initial statements. Why does government even seek to raise revenue? Why do we establish revenue policy? It's because there are needs of the state for its citizens. In the past weeks, I've sat in hearings where NDE, or Nevada Department of Education, has stated that if they had a wish list, it would be for another $125 million, other than what we are currently offering. I've sat and listened to RTC come and say they need $40 million for services, or it may be interrupted in the southern region. I've listened to our behavioral health consortium ask for $21 million every year to pay for supportive housing and rental assistance for our most at-risk populations. Even myself, I'm seeking $40 million to figure out how to fund homelessness. There is a policy that we need in order to help cover cavities for adults in the state of Nevada. It has a $69 million fiscal note. Even with all of the revenue that we have right now, where everyone is saying we have $2 billion, the needs it's still not enough money to meet the needs of our current residents and what we had particularly on the table in 29 and 21. We're watching the money go out and still saying, how can we find additional money in order to cover really the needs of our people? At the same time, I have teachers coming and saying, I've seen how you have given a 23% increase in finance to the police and state employees, but what about us? Where would we even find the 23% to give to teachers on top of, and this is in addition to the $250 million bill that's already out there. And so when entities come and say, you know, why are we on the hook? Why are you trying to bring a tax that, you know, will impede the live entertainment or the sports games? It's because, for me, it's about fair play and it's about tax policy that makes sense. Not only does this bill for live entertainment tax remove the exemption from professional sports teams, it removes the exemption from professional sports teams because right now, gaming pays it. Gaming pays it at 9%. In this bill, I'm dropping the rate, which makes it 7.87%. And because I'm dropping the rate, I'm getting as close to tax neutral policy as possibly it exists. According to Brookings Institute, they said some of the most coveted kind of tax policy, number one, is to treat all companies the same and to make the tax policy as neutral as possible. That the underpinning is to achieve a broader base and lower the rate. So SB 444, although highly contested, it does exactly that. It broadens the base by bringing in the resale of tickets. It adds marketplace facilitator language that we had when we passed the bill in 2019 to bring in the online sales, online ticket platforms so that they would be brought into the base, and then it lowers the rate in order to bring in the sports teams, the professional sports teams. And so because of that base, we actually are able to achieve a potential $500 million a year that would help take care of taxes in the state of, revenue in the state of Nevada. Can I get this chart to show up? I have it, but it's not on any screen. I want to share a chart so you can see the work that I went through in order to figure out how did I even arrive at 7.87? How did I figure out what would be the base as we moved into this conversation? So I looked at, if you look at the blue line, this is LET under current law. And so when you look at that blue line, you see what the economic forecast is, and you can see what the tax base is currently under the 9%. And then I went and looked at the LET with the elimination of the professional home team exemption under 368A 200, sub 4. And so we looked at what would happen if we included this rate, and then when you look at the percentages, you see that we were looking at, dropping at 8.29, and then we looked at what would it look like if in the green, LET with the inclusion of resale tickets. It was already on my list to go after resale of tickets because I was interested in ticket bots. And it just so happened that when I was having this conversation, I was just like, well, let's look at it. And so you can see the estimated tax base increase resulting from the inclusion of the resale of tickets, gaming and non-gaming, and the estimated value from the inclusion of resale tickets at 9% rate. And then what does it look like when we go into the 7.87? And so, I kept looking and I was saying, all right, let's look at LET with the elimination of NRS 368, which is the orange. And then I looked at the sales tax rate to determine where should I land in regards to what is the appropriate rate and what could we see in terms of revenue that we could gain by broadening the base and lowering the rate. And so I went with the 7.87%. And the reason why is because I thought it was, number one, fair policy in order to bring in a group that had not been formally taxed and say, not only am I giving a break, right? I'm lowering the rate to then bring in some fairness. And it'll drop the rate across the board for gaming and the sports teams that would be coming into the tax base. So in my mind, I thought it was fair. I also thought it was tax neutral. And I also thought I was meeting the goals of what would be considered tax neutral policy across the board if anyone was to test the measure, or as close to tax neutral policy, because it's not, but I think, so, and then when I started to present the idea, folks were like, oh, but not me. Don't include me. We have a contract. And I'm like, there is no contract that can bind the legislature to tell the legislature not to pursue a revenue policy that brings in a group. And so, but that's what I heard. And I was just like, well, you can make the argument, but there is nothing established that says that there is some contract out there between the state and a sports team that says that we cannot expand our revenue base, drop the rate, and try to include the professional sports teams and eliminate the exemption. So with that, I will do some highlights over the bill. I do want to make mention that I did accept an amendment from, I believe it was Matt Walker's group, to eliminate the minor league teams. It's similar to the exemption that I had prior. And I do want to bring this up because last time when I had the bill in 2021, I wasn't dropping the rate. I was adding the LET before the games even started. And there was a hubbub about that. It was like, well, we haven't even had our first game. How dare you? And I was just like, well, it made more sense that I institute the rate before there was a game, because how can you argue against it when you haven't even played a game? Now the argument is, we've played several games. Please still don't tax us. Doesn't matter whether or not there's a competitive advantage that exists that no one else has. It doesn't matter that someone else is paying it and they're not. It doesn't matter that the current rate is 9%, I'm dropping it to 7.87. None of those things matter. The basic argument is not me, not my corporate entity, not my team, no matter what. And so it's up to the wisdom of this committee to decide what they feel or what they are willing to agree with. But I have tried, as chair of revenue, to be as fair as possible and to present the argument that I've not only been fair, it's been fair play. It's been equal treatment of each group the same, and dropping the rate to allow that, so that the competitive advantage that currently exists, that there's actually a rate that's attached to the economic activity that is occurring in the South, and occurring in the South in a significant way, where we are watching the revenue come in and we have no parts of it. We have no parts of the needs for the state. We have no parts to say, well, how is RTC going to get folks who actually ride the bus to the resorts to work? There's no conversation about the needs of the state. The only conversation is, I don't want to pay it, not me, we shouldn't do this. And I decided I was going to present the bill anyway, regardless if folks are in opposition or not, regardless if anyone else was in opposition, that I was at least going to present the policy and put it in the record. So with that, I will go ahead and do quick highlights on the bill. So if you look at section 1, pretty much 1.3, 1.5, all the way to 1.7. This is an adoption of the marketplace facilitator language that we currently have in law under the Amazon bill that we moved in 2019. The reason why we put the marketplace facilitator language in there is to try to manifest how will the resale of tickets work within the state of Nevada. They're mostly online platforms. Almost every ticket provider is in some online platform, whether or not it's Ticketmaster, StubHub, or some other group. And so it made sense that you would put them in a marketplace facilitator format, meaning that they would register with the Department of Taxation. They would then be identified as a reseller of tickets. And then the Department of Taxation would then go about setting the regulations in order to receive the sales tax of 7.87 off, well, I don't know, they would receive the sales tax rate from those entities within the Department of Taxation. So the way that Marketplace Facilitator worked in 2019, the law passed, then everyone became aware, and then they all came to Department of Taxation, got into the system. Then we were able to get an inventory on how many businesses were going to be affected. Then Department of Taxation did a reg, and then there was conversation on the reg, and then the entities then went about the business of complying with that regulatory process. So that's what those sections speak to. In section 2, which is the resale or resale language, you guys have listened to a lot of presentations within the taxation committee. The resale statute has been around for a really, really long time. It is not new. It is new in the context of being applied within the LET framework, but it is not new law in terms of that the state of Nevada didn't all of a sudden manufacture a resale statute. We actually had a resale statute and we're applying it within the LET context. In section 3.1, we identify what a seller is. In section 3.3, we have the discussion of about the imposition remittance of the tax under 368A 200 to apply to a marketplace facilitator during a calendar year. What's the cumulative gross receipts? It continues to talk about the roles of the marketplace facilitator and how they will facilitate a sale. It came up, what happens if an individual is selling a resale ticket? In this case, if it happens, in the example that was given to me, and I'm so glad that it was given to me prior to this hearing, was that I guess on eBay, there is a StubHub which allows an individual to then load a ticket and then offer it for resale. How would that be treated? That would be treated as StubHub being the marketplace facilitator who would then remit the tax. It wouldn't be Sam or Joe who loaded it into the bill onto the website. It would be the marketplace facilitator who would then remit the tax to Department of Taxation. The bill also speaks to the same exact language that came up in the Amazon bill, marketplace facilitator, that it only applies to transactions, 200 transactions over the year. So this isn't going to just meet the regular Joe who's standing on the sidewalk saying, well, I'm reselling the ticket and now I have to register with the Department of Taxation. You would have to still meet the threshold and the resale portion of selling more than 200 in a year. In section 3.7, basically the department is what I said before. They will provide a regulation for the provisions of this chapter that deals with the imposition, collection, and remittance. If you go to section 3.9, basically it's a reiteration that this shall not be construed to create any remedy or right of action against a marketplace facilitator. The marketplace facilitator that is required to collect taxes imposed by this chapter is immune from civil liability for claims arising from or related to overpayment. And then the bill goes into section 5, and then it basically adopts the language that were with respect to any tax imposed in this chapter with a marketplace facilitator or referrer is required to collect the marketplace facilitator or referrer. And then we get to section 6, which lays out the tax imposed, and then we talk about the live entertainment tax shall be collected on the reseller from the purchaser at the time of resale of the admission to the facility in the state where live entertainment is provided. So when we looked at this bill, we talked to, we actually had a conversation with Gaming Control Board because we know that there are the folks on the platform, and then we have the brokers that exist who might be selling tickets within the gaming context. And so what we did in the bill was to have Department of Taxation adopt the broker language so that the broker language would come under the Department of Taxation, not just the Gaming Control Board. And so in that situation, typically they purchase a bulk set of tickets and they will then go and sell those tickets because they believe they're going to be able to sell all of them. Typically, those tickets are sold at a certain rate, but those brokers would still fall under the resale language that we adopted in this bill because we were trying to figure out, all right, what is all the activity that's going on within the resale market that we need to understand or adopt language around so we know who we're picking up, who we're not picking up. And so just as I said before, if it's 200 transactions a year, that person is going to be excluded if they fall under the 199. So with that, I'll open myself up for questions.
Thank you so much, Senator Neal. Do we have questions from committee members? Senator Severs-Ganser.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. And so you kind of talked about this a little bit. You talked about how organizations came here with the understanding that there wouldn't be any LET on the professional sales. And I think it was used as an incentive, but you were suggesting that those things change. Because I'm wondering about, since that was important to some of the organizations that came here, it becomes unpredictable if we live up to the promises that we make, if we change statute moving forward, if that was one of the incentives to bring them. And we've got other sports teams that are looking at Nevada. So the question is, whether do you think this creates uncertainty and that we need to be consistent as far as if we had that prohibition for the teams that are here, that we should continue those prohibitions to remain, so it remains as an incentive.
Thank you for that. So that was one of the questions that I went back and looked at, and Mr. Nakamoto can correct me if I'm wrong. But when we put in the LET exemption, I believe it was in 2015 when we made the changes, right? Not the sports exemption. So it was in well before the sports teams even came and courted us, correct?
Have to get ready, used to these new microphones. Mr. Vice Chair, Michael Nakamoto with Fiscal Analysis Division for the record. The provisions that are in the live entertainment tax in Chapter 368A relating to professional sports teams were put in place in the 2015 session. There were provisions prior to that that dealt with certain events or certain sports or certain sports. So professional baseball and NASCAR, I believe, that pre-existed that. But the way that the language is under the current law was put in place in 2015.
Thank you for that, Mr. Nakamoto. And so when I looked at that statute, it kind of helped to sort out the argument, right? That it wasn't that the exemption had nothing to do with some promise. I didn't make a promise as a sit-in legislator in 2015, and that it was there, and so there was, I didn't see it as a promise that we were breaking because it was there prior to their arrival.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And so I think there were some provisions, but maybe not specifically around the professional teams, because we didn't have any professional teams maybe to exclude at the time or to exempt. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Anyone else with any other questions? Well, I think Senator Severs-Ganser asked my question as to why the exemption was created or when it was created. Senator Neal, I had this conversation with local bar owners in my district. Shout out to Sand Dollar. It's one of my favorite bars in my district. It's an iconic venue, but they had mentioned that they do charge the LET tax because they are covered, even though they're a small venue that has been in Las Vegas for multiple years, because they fall under they have live performances almost every night. They're covered by it, and then they saw the inequity that you mentioned as part of this bill. So I think it is a question as to who it pays for, et cetera. And have there been any conversations as to if they wanted to keep this incentive? For instance, if there is a new sports team, is there like a level provision to keep that, or what has been the conversations you've had?
Senator Dina Neal, for the record. The conversation has been, it's still a new industry, it's still growing, therefore, we should remain exempt until the industry grows. I don't know what that growth is. I don't know if that's 5 years down the road. The way I interpreted this policy is that it is equal treatment of all entities. It's, people claim, gaming is making $1 billion, right? Yet they pay it. If anyone had a complaint, to me, it should be the gaming industry, right? But but they're not complaining about paying the 9%. You have another industry that could almost meet equal magnitude of the amount of revenue that it could generate. And they're saying no rate, right? And the question is, when is it acceptable to have a conversation about fair play? When is it acceptable to have a conversation about the competitive advantage that you may be receiving over and above other corporations? We've been having this argument around exemptions, abatements for a while on what is the appropriate carrot to bring in an industry. And I guess the better question is, when is the appropriate time to pull the carrot? How much revenue should be generated before the carrot is pulled? Is that year 10? Is that year 20? Because if that's the case, the longer you have it, the more you're going to want to enjoy it, correct? And so it's a philosophical question for the Committee on Revenue to make a discussion about what is appropriate fairness within tax policy. In this regard, I could have brought a bill that said it's 9%, equal rate that's currently being paid. But in this case, I said, all right, well, let me try to sweeten the carrot by saying, well, you know what? I'm just going to drop the rate for everyone. I'm going to broaden the base, drop the rate from everyone, and now you can come in the door. Not at 9%, but actually at a lower rate. The answer was still no. Not me, though. Why now? We came in with what they say is a promise. And maybe I feel like I can make that statement because I didn't vote for it, right? I didn't vote for the stadium. But it wasn't even about that personal vote for me. It was about the fact that I felt like I was presenting fair and neutral tax policy in order to broaden the base to deal with the revenue needs of the state of Nevada. I am being impeded by the revenue conversations because everyone sees the $2 billion excess, but they're not looking down the road at 25. They're not looking down the road at 27 when the federal stimulus drops out of the sky and it is no longer a part of the revenue for the state of Nevada, and now we have to pay for things. Where is that money going to come from? I have been in this building for 12 years, and I have watched the conversation no matter what year it was, not this year, not that year, let's wait. But when the sky is falling, literally, when we were in COVID, that was the worst time that we were ever moved policy. But what I remember distinctly is that we were sitting there having a conversation of whether or not we should cut childcare versus healthcare. And I was sitting there saying to myself, you have got to be kidding me that now we're having a conversation on whether or not somebody can get glasses. And then all of a sudden the federal stimulus drops in and everybody forgets that the conversation prior to us even coming in COVID and in 2019, we still weren't whole as a state. We still needed money just for the simple things. And I'm not talking about legislative wish list. I'm talking about literally being able to say, if you go to the dentist under Medicaid, you can get cavities filled. Not your teeth pulled, not your teeth cleaned, because right now those are the only two options. I listen to mental health professionals come in and say, we don't have money for supportive housing, we don't have money for emergency housing, we don't have money to take care of homelessness, and those are still the conversations right now. And so my question is, you may hate the fact that the state wants to generate revenue, but I want to try to generate revenue, I believe, in a fair way that tries to look towards the future of this state and have some money sitting there waiting for us so that we can actually take care of the needs that are going on in the state of Nevada. Because I can guarantee, and if I was to bet $1 right now and pay my 7.87 cents, my $7.87 on that dollar that in 25 and 27, we're going to be asking the question of how do we raise more revenue?
Thank you so much, Senator Neal. Senator Buck.
Thank you, Senator Neal. Thank you, Chair, or Vice Chair Donate. So do you think that this policy incentivizes teams to come here? And then if I own a team, and what are the taxes that I currently pay? Sorry, I don't know that already, but just wondering that.
Thank you. Senator Dina Neal for the record. So just like all corporate entities, unless you fall under the commerce tax, which is $4 million and under, then you are paying MBT, right? Payroll tax, which you should be paying on your employees. You are paying probably commerce tax, and then you are paying sales tax, and in this case, property tax, depending on whether or not you were one of the companies that received an abatement or exemption, right? So we know that there might have been abatement packages associated with some of those teams. So I think that, and I don't know, that's probably something Mr. Nakamoto could break out on whether or not any of the sports teams received an abatement, because we know they received an exemption on the LET. A couple of things that I want to make mention, because you did ask whether or not this, I guess, could prevent them being coming in. And I guess my question is, and I'm going to go back to the fair play argument. Gaming pays MBT, property tax, sales tax, LET. So if they're paying it all, right? Here's sports teams. We have several now. We just don't have one. So clearly they were able to come in. The question is, how would you like them to grow? Would you like them to grow in absence of the taxes that currently our largest industry is paying? Or would you like them to have equal share in that payment of taxes and revenue for the state of Nevada? And that ultimately is the wisdom and for this committee, right? Because there are several groups who pay it. NASCAR is still in. We gave them exemption and said, okay, well, but I think it's, Mr. Nakamoto, is it on the third race or fifth race that they pay, or the second? When does NASCAR start to pay the LET?
For the record, Michael Nakamoto, Chief Principal Deputy Fiscal Analyst with the Fiscal Analysis Division. I believe and this is me suddenly feeling like having a pop quiz. I believe the live entertainment tax, they are exempt as long as they have 2 races within the state in a calendar year.
And then by the time they get to the third race, it kicks in. No, it doesn't. So on the 2 races. All right. So we have still different exemptions in play, but for me, it's about fairness. It really is a fairness question. And I guess the question is, how long should they not participate? We don't do income tax. Some people consider the commerce tax a corporate tax, and it is. But it also has a threshold, right? And we did it at the time under a Republican governor who wanted to fund education at the time. That was the argument, that was the play under commerce tax, under Sandoval. It was a contentious hearing, contentious. But he also moved the policy because what he knew needed to happen in the state of Nevada in terms of additional revenue. And that was a very hard thing to do. But we don't not talk about revenue because it's hard, because it's difficult. There's a conversation sometimes you just have to have about what is the revenue needs in the state of Nevada. And that's why I'm bringing the bill.
So last question, can you wait till we win the Super Bowl? Just kidding.
Thank you, Senator Buck. I'm like trying to think back as to, I mean, obviously I wasn't here in 2015. there were sports that were already paying this before. And so, if I'm not mistaken, we've had athletic events like UFC or boxing where the LET tax was included as part of the ticket sales before the exemption. Is that correct, Senator Neal?
Senator Dina Neal for the record. So prior to 2015, I'm going to need Mr. Nakamoto to say this one, because prior to 2015, so there were changes, huge changes in 2015 to the LET under Marilyn Kirkpatrick, Chair of Revenue back then. Can you add that to the record?
Mr. Vice Chair, Michael Nakamoto for the record. In respect to your question about the taxation of unarmed combat, so UFC and boxing and the like, that is not and has never been under the live entertainment tax. Those provisions are administered by the State Athletic Commission. They have a separate tax that they collect, which is independent of the LET.
Thank you so much. And then in other states that have included this, do they usually pass this on to the consumer? What's the general provisions? Senator Neal.
Senator Dina Neal, it is passed on to the consumer as it currently is passed on to the consumer in gaming.
Thank you so much. I think that clarifies the important conversation of equity. Senator Spearman.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. So I was here in 2015, and we were in this room. It was configured differently, and heard Governor Sandoval make the case for why we needed to restructure our revenue stream. And I also remember coming back in 2017, and a number of really good people who voted for it didn't come back. And the people who argued that it shouldn't have happened, in many cases, were the same people who said our education system, is raggedy, who talked about our mental health system, a number of things. And Chair Neal, when COVID came, we weren't just arguing about that or trying to decide that. I clearly remember us talking about diapers and Depends. So I guess here's my question. If we don't do this, how do we get the necessary things that the state needs? The state is growing, and people are moving here, and that means that the education system will be growing. It means that transportation infrastructure will be growing. And every session we come here, we talk about health care. So if we don't do this, where do we go? And I remember then Speaker Kirkpatrick, when she brought it in 2015, I think she asked a very similar question. We don't have an income tax, and maybe we should ask Mr. Yakamoto to look at how California taxes the rate. And wait, hold on. How California taxes the rate, their income tax rate, and what would that look like? Because I think once people see, what are we going to tax? And really, who are we going to tax? And how do we get the revenue to become the state that can be greater than it is now? And I said, it comes down to that for me. How do we get that? Where do we get that from? Nobody wants an income tax, a state income tax, nobody. But every other option for a revenue stream, you literally have to fight tooth and nail for. So I think that was a question.
Thank you for that, Senator Dina Neal. Listen, I'm never trying to have the California sell any tax rate, right? I think they're very special as a state. They have lots of taxes. Here's what I'm going to say to you. My opinion is this. What I've seen is our boom and bust cycle, right? I've seen our flow every 10 years where we fall out and we need revenue. And then we need revenue, and then we pick that one industry that is going to be the industry of the session, right? Whether or not it's mining, gaming, whether or not we pick, go after the MBT or some other thing. In this scenario, I saw it as, I'd rather raise money when times are okay, because then you have room to breathe. You have room to think. You have room to examine where is your revenue, right? Typically, I've watched the cycle where we fight and say we have no money, no money to cover our needs, and then we want to have the revenue conversation. We've been doing it that way for a really, really long time. And so I always look at it in real life as a real life person. If a person comes to you and says, you know what, I don't have any money right now, help me out with some money, what's your first question? What have you saved? How much have you spent? Typically, right? That's what you want to know. How much did you put away while you're asking me for money? And if they say, well, I didn't save anything, your next question is, so why should I help you when you never saved what you had? And then you have another scenario where they say, well, I never had enough money to begin with. So I was always behind. I always had $10, but my expenses were $40. I always had $50, but my expenses were $100. Well, in the state of Nevada, that is pretty much what's happening. When I sit in Senate Finance, I'm listening to all of these needs that we're probably not going to cover with the $2 billion. We're probably not going to cover, and I'm waiting for the May 1st Economic Forum to drop out of the sky, right? I'm wishing for it to be a certain number. Probably not what everybody else wishes, but I'm wishing for us to flatline. I'm wishing for us to normalize, because I want to be in the position where I can say, hey, you know, last time I had that revenue conversation, maybe we ought to be thinking about it. Do I think we should save? Do I think we should think about our government differently? They always make that counter argument, but then we always have to look back and say, well, did we ever fund it, right? Did we ever fund education? Did we ever fund healthcare? Did we ever fund mental health fully? And the answer would be no. We have always picked a winner for each session. You win education, you win public health, you win this. It's always a winner each session, and that's the one that walks out of the door. This session is going to be state employees who, thank God, we have enough money to try to help offset 10 years of what we didn't do. But after that check is written, what's left? And then on the other side, everybody wants to enjoy the privilege of not paying but benefiting from our consumers, benefiting from the out-of-state tourism that comes in for the games, and saying, but I don't want to share any of that with the state of Nevada for the needs of those citizens. Is that appropriate? Is that right? And for me, the answer is no. And I think it's fair, because I'm not even asking you to pay the existing rate that one of our largest industries is paying. I'm asking you to pay a lower rate, and I'm broadening the base. And it's still like, oh no, I know tax neutral policy that's where we should go, but not for me though. Just no. And so, you know, I'm presenting this bill knowing that there's conflict, knowing that there's opposition, knowing that there is a counter, knowing that somebody's probably going to take my words and flip them and use them for the benefit of their argument. But this policy is the right thing to do, right? And at the end of the day, if the only thing that happens is that there is at least a record for the future chair of Senate Revenue, who's going to come into this building and say, I can go back and look at the legislative record, and I can look at the table, I can look and have a conversation about what can I do in the future 10 years, 5 years, 3 years from now, when maybe someone is ready. At least they're going to have the legislative policy to examine and to review. My job in this building as chair of revenue is to have a conversation about revenue and how to achieve it in the state of Nevada. And I've tried to do it in a fair way, and I've tried to bring the policy to as tax neutral as it can possibly be. I don't know what other kind of policy there is out there, right? And so I'm gonna get off my soapbox. and I'm going to go ahead and, open up for, the very limited support, and then we'll just hear all the wonderful opposition of loveliness.
Thank you so much. One more question, Senator
I
Spearman?
just want to follow up, since we're doing this for posterity, my question for posterity is, if we don't do this, then what? If we don't do it now, then when?
Senator Spearman, this is Senator Dina Neal for the record. I don't know when. I mean, I had a conversation the other day on digital goods, right? How the erosion of the sales tax base. Now I'm having a conversation on tax neutral policy. Neither one of them have room to breathe, right? Whether or not the policy makes sense or not, there is just something going on in the sense that don't save money when you have money, but wait until it hits the fan, and then let's go ask for money. I think that's an inappropriate behavior. I think that's the wrong strategy. I thought it was the wrong strategy in 2011 when I came into this building. I was like, I believe in saving. I do, but when we have so many needs, it's really hard to pull money back. And trust me, in finance, I'm like, how about we not spend this? How about we not give this? And then on the other end, someone comes to my office and says, but I really, really need this. When RTC came to me and said, if we don't get this money, service will cease in Southern Nevada. I'm saying to myself, are you kidding me? Where are we supposed to get this money from? We have this, this piggy bank that just keeps rolling out money. That's not how this works. And so everyone is saying, I have a dire need to take care of this now, today. And I'm saying there's not enough money in the excess to give you all of that. So I continue to have my revenue bills and present them in this committee, knowing that there's slim conversation around the passage, but my role as chair of revenue is to have the conversation whether or not it's popular or unpopular. And so I brought forward tax neutral policy. I brought forward policy that dealt with erosion of the sales tax base. And I'm sure you'll see another policy from me that deals with some other area. However, this is where we're at. We need to have a philosophical conversation with ourselves on how we run government, how we fund government, how we save in government. These are all legitimate conversations, but you can't save when you don't have anything.
Thank you so much, Senator Neal. Seeing no other questions, let's go ahead and move on to testimony for this bill. We're going to start with support testimonies. If there's anyone that would like to provide support testimony, please come forward. We don't have anyone in this room, anyone in Las Vegas, and anyone virtually.
Chair, there are no callers willing to testify at this time.
Thank you so much. Let's move on to opposition. If there's anyone that would oppose this bill, please come forward.
Vice Chairman, members of the committee, Alfredo Alonso, today representing the Vegas Golden Knights. And I know how passionate the senator is, and I respect her for it. I understand exactly what she's saying. Without the debate, you can't solve problems. So the fact that she is having the debate, I think, is important. So no matter what comes from this, again, I have nothing but respect for the senator. With respect to the bill at hand, I just want to lend a little bit of background to the situation with respect to the Golden Knights. So in 2015, we were working on getting a hockey team in Las Vegas. The commissioner specifically had told us, if there's a ticket tax in Nevada, I will not award Las Vegas a team. It was that simple. So we worked with obviously both leadership and the governor's office. There was already an exemption for minor league baseball that I believe Assemblyman Arbery had put into place years before. I want to say 2009, 2011. And the reason for it was, again, these live entertainment was the old cabaret tax, and it's expanded, obviously, over the years as Nevada needed it. And it's because we don't have an income tax, and there's always a need as the state grows. But with respect to minor league baseball, it was very difficult to make a go at minor league baseball because the tickets were just, unfortunately, that 9–10% for some families is the difference between going and not going. And the viability of these teams was an issue, obviously. So there was already an exemption, and the 2015 legislature simply added the major league definition into the statute to cover the Knights. And believe me, no one thought the Knights were coming. They just thought there's a possibility we might as well make it easier for them, especially if Commissioner Bettman is saying he won't do it. What's important to also understand is that the only live entertainment tax, or the only ticket tax that I know of, and I've asked, and we're trying to do some research on it, was Chicago's team, and that was to specifically build the stadium. So that was a very key piece to it. And again, that's important to understand because ticket taxes simply don't exist because it's very difficult to pass. They're already expensive in many cases, tickets to get to a game. The feeling of the leagues is to not, it's a regressive tax, it's very difficult to pass on to families, and they try to avoid it where they can. And I don't believe even California has a ticket tax. So I think that's very important. What's also important with this unique to the Golden Knights, 85% of the tickets sold are locals. So you're not passing that along to tourists, you're passing it on to locals, and that's very important. And one other piece that's also very important is the Golden Knights, like all NHL teams, count on local support. We don't have a significant television contract. It's a very unique situation. I think it's the same with the Aces and minor league sports in general. We count on locals showing up and watching a game. So again, I think it makes it that much more difficult to be part of such a tax. So I just wanted to bring that out. With respect to the secondary market, this is an issue that's been talked about, I think, ever since this body took on the first ticket bills to try to protect the consumer. It's been talked about over and over again. I know there's a lot of complications with it. And I have to hand it to the senator for attempting to tackle this issue because it is something that's frankly been talked about around the country. Now you look at the issue that came up with Taylor Swift. It's sort of been been talked about even more lately. And we don't know where we are on that yet because we're looking at how that would look like from the ticket creator or the enterprise that's actually putting out the product and how that would ultimately work. And we'd like to continue working with the senator on that. But I do want to indicate that I've got Chip Siegel, who's the Golden Knights general counsel, and Todd Pollock, who's the vice president for ticketing. They're in Las Vegas in case anyone does have questions and wants to get a little more information. But I hate to even age myself and be able to give you all that information, but sadly I was around, and yes, I'm here to answer any questions as well.
Thank you, Mr. Alonso. I have a quick question. So in talking, I know we're going to have other folks that want to speak in opposition. Apologize for you for being the first one. I'm sure that other folks can also add this to their testimony. So I guess my question is, to Chair Neal's point, it's if there were promises that were made to help incentivize teams to move, and there was a preference for using this as a strategy, when does the strategy expire at some point, right? There's always going to be a turnover of legislators. is there going to be a conversation at some point where that is approached, or is the expectation from the Golden Knights and other professional sports teams that this is a luxury that we would like to have permanently?
To Vice Chairman Alfredo Alonso, again for the record, I don't, with all due respect, I don't consider it a luxury. I think the fact that no other state has ticket taxes that are simply put on without a nexus to the building of a facility. And again, Chicago's the only one I know of that has actually added a ticket tax to build their stadium. If you look back at the Golden Knights situation, T-Mobile was built by MGM and their partners. Bill Foley spent over $500 million on a team and built the facility in Summerlin, and did so on his own dime. And I would like to also tell you where they're different is he moved a lot of the Fidelity companies to Las Vegas, paying taxes as a business, paying every tax that's available, and so it wasn't just bringing a team here, it was literally bringing his company here. I think that's very important, because if the luxury is not passing along an additional tax to their customers, their fans, I guess that's really where I don't consider it a luxury, because this isn't something that is done in every state. It's not something that is normal in the course of business.
Thank you. I think I appreciate your sentiments. I think there is a conversation to have as to, if this exemption exists, how we look at it for teams that want to move in. I think that is an appropriate conversation, but I also recognize that it kind of conflates with how the LAT tax also is already for gaming and what that entails. And so I think that's a valuable conversation to have, but I'll keep my questions if we continue on. Please proceed. Senator Spearman? Sorry, Christine.
Thank you. So, Mr. Alonso, I appreciate everything that happened in Henderson and that sort of thing, but one of the things that I constantly think about, excuse me, and this was made apparent when I chaired HHS, because we never had enough money to do those things. And there were some rather wealthy corporations in the state, and most of their employees were on Medicaid. And I think about the percentage of teachers that don't make enough money, and some of them receive social service benefits. And so I guess I kind of see this not necessarily luxury, but some of the people that maybe keep the grounds of the stadiums and the sports arenas, those sorts of things, if they are on Medicaid, SNAP, or other social services, without some form of income, all we do is just spread that cost over to everybody. And so it's like a transfer cost. You see what I'm saying? I'm thinking, and I'm sensitive to, the commissioner saying, if you don't do this, then, but I also hear my colleagues say, does it ever expire? And what do we get 10 years down the road? What do we get 5 years down the road? And again, my question is always, if not this, then what? And I don't know.
Senator Spearman, was that a question at the end, or?
No, if not this, then what?
Mr. Vice Chair, to you and through you to Senator Spearman, I'd want to attract more companies like Fidelity and Bill Foley, who bring well-paying businesses with benefits to the state of Nevada. It's exactly what I heard earlier with respect to the types of businesses we want to bring here, and not just good paying businesses, but ones that pay every tax that you're speaking of, and pay their people well. And I think you will see that, and I could provide any of that information if you'd like. But again, I think that's the caliber of business you want here, truly, because at the end of the day, all we're talking about really is a pass-through tax to our fans. And those are the families that live in your districts. So I think that's where we disagree. I understand the need for revenue, but that's truly how we look at it. It is very important to keep those costs down so more families can attend those games.
One more follower.
Yeah, just the only follow-up. So I get that. And so when we talk about a pass-through, that's because there is a certain percentage for the bottom line of profit. And so then my question would be, is there anything that could be done so that if the margin for profit is here, if we do this collectively, can it go there, and then the stakeholders and stockholders can still flourish? And I had a bill, I want to say it was 2017, the Benefit Corporation, that allowed people who are doing something for the community to not have to do that fiduciary responsibility to maximize the profits. You understand what I'm saying? So if this is the profit margin and the state that we're in, and people who are not as wealthy, and we can take that profit margin down just a little bit so that it's not a pass-through tax.
Mr. Vice Chair, to you and through you, and I know where you're going, and with that, and I would argue that the foundation that the Golden Knights have, and many professional sports teams also have, are a part of that. Foley and his folks give millions of dollars a year through the foundation that stay mostly in Southern Nevada, and so those margins are already small for hockey, and that's important to understand. It's also, those margins are even smaller for minor league sports. So I think you have a whole package here where the state benefits by their very existence.
Thank you. Just one last question. I promise this is from me. It's going to be easy. Okay, so if I wanted to buy a ticket from the Golden Knights, nosebleeds, because I always sit in the nosebleeds. They're great. What are the fees that are associated with paying for that ticket? So there's a ticket price, right? There's a base price. What else are there other additional fees, other taxes? What else does the consumer pay for?
Mr. Vice Chair, I believe Todd Pollock, who is in our Las Vegas office, could probably answer that better than I, because I'm just going to guess.
I see them approaching in Las Vegas. So once again, what does the consumer pay for when they purchase a ticket to go to a Golden Knights game?
Good afternoon, Vice Chair Todd Pollock with the Vegas Golden Knights. So they'll pay anywhere from about a 5 to 7% service fee that is assessed by our ticket provider AXS, in addition to a $3 facility improvement fee that's charged by T-Mobile Arena.
Okay, and so that's, from my understanding, there's the base that goes to the organization. There's an additional fee that goes to the facility cost, and then there's another one for the vendor. Is that correct?
That is correct. That's a facility improvement fee for upgrades and renovations.
Okay. I think that's an important clarification as part of this hearing. Okay. Please proceed. We'll continue with testimony.
Good afternoon, Vice Chair and members of the committee. For the record, Christina Kleist, representing the Latin Chamber of Commerce. Unfortunately, today we are in opposition as presented. We understand the exemption provisions for professional sports were pre-existing to any teams moving to Nevada. However, those exemptions were and continue to be relied upon. We do not want to give the impression to those looking at our state that Nevada will seek out a business, any kind of business, and incentivize those businesses to establish in Nevada in some way, and then flip the script once they have committed. This bill could have greater unintended consequences on all future business here in Nevada, and for that reason, that's why we're opposed.
Thank you so much. Anyone else willing to testify in opposition, please come forward. Let's go to Las Vegas.
Mr. Vice Chair, members of the committee, for the record, Piper Overstreet, that's Overstreet. I am the Vice President of Government Relations for the Las Vegas Raiders. I am here in opposition to SB 444. Since opening in 2021, Allegiant Stadium has welcomed over 2.6 million visitors from 122 different countries. In 2024, for the first time in history, we will be the host city for the Super Bowl, an event that is projected to bring up to $1 billion in revenue to Nevada. Whether it's Raiders home games, a UNLV game, a concert, or a major soccer event, Allegiant Stadium and the Raiders have provided a world-class venue that is doing what it was designed to do, which is create substantial economic positives, provide opportunities for authentic community engagement, and be a catalyst for professional sports industry growth in Nevada. The Las Vegas Raiders remain committed to making an impact, as evidenced by the contributions made through our community relations and Raiders Foundation programming, totaling in the millions of dollars. Our efforts to support Nevada students have continued beyond the pledge Mark Davis made to eliminate student meal debt in 2020. We have provided thousands of dollars in grant funds directly to public schools, boys and girls clubs, and after-school programming. Since 2018, we have hosted over 200 Raiders junior training camps in Nevada, serving over 40,000 youth. I would need more time to include an overview of all the things this team has accomplished since moving to Las Vegas, because commitment is at the core of everything that we do. The Raiders specifically discussed and negotiated the lack of a ticket tax as part of the financing structure that brought the team here. When an agreement is entered into, it's incumbent that all parties uphold their end of the agreement to realize the true benefits. Passing Senate Bill 444 would fly in the face of that agreement. For that reason, we are opposed to SB 444. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and Mr. Vice Chair and members of the committee. My name is Jennifer Azzi, spelled A-Z-Z-I, and I'm Chief Business Development Officer for the Las Vegas Aces. I'm here in opposition to Senate Bill 444. As the reigning WNBA champions, we're so proud to call Las Vegas home of the Aces. It was an amazing accomplishment to bring that trophy home last season, making us the first major professional sports team to win a national championship for Las Vegas. The Aces are opposed to SB 444 for several reasons, but the increased cost to our fans tops the list. If you've attended a game, you already know we have some of the best fans in the world. WNBA fans have a certain level of passion to begin with. And what makes the Aces fan base so incredibly special is the fact that our fan base is local. Senate Bill 444 will hurt the Las Vegas locals that turn out to cheer us on. Attending a Las Vegas Aces game is a relatively affordable night out with the family. It's one of the reasons we are a popular choice for those seeking to catch a professional game in their own backyard. But adding a ticket tax, as SB 444 proposes on top of the parking concessions and merchandise that often goes along with a game, it will change the equation for our fans. We also oppose SB 444 because it doesn't serve Nevada, specifically Las Vegas, as maintaining its hard-fought and winning culture of being the sports and entertainment capital of the world. When we established a brand new WNBA market a few short years ago, it was our local fan base that made it possible. SB 444 hurts the local support that we've worked so hard to build. Our season kicks off next month, and we're counting on our fans to lead us to our next championship. We urge your opposition on SB 444, and thank you for the opportunity to testify today. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Anyone else in Las Vegas? Let's go to virtual.
Chair, there are no callers willing to testify at this time.
Thank you so much. And now we will go on to neutral. Is there anyone willing to testify in neutral? Please proceed forward.
Good afternoon, Vice Chair Danyate and members of the committee. Kanani Espinoza on behalf of UNLV. UNLV is in neutral on Senate Bill 444 as this legislation does not impact the university or our collegiate sports teams. However, UNLV would like to highlight our strong partnership with the Las Vegas Raiders. Not only does the UNLV football team play at Allegiant Stadium, but there is a significant charitable volunteer partnership between our university and the Las Vegas Raiders. The Raiders have existing partnerships with UNLV Athletics, School of Public Health, and Office of Government and Community Engagement, which helps benefit community needs, and we are grateful for our relationship. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Anyone else willing to testify neutral here in Carson City? We will move to Las Vegas and virtually.
Chair, there are no callers willing to testify at this time.
Thank you so much. I'll invite back Chair Neal for any closing remarks.
Senator Dina Neal for the record. Thank you for allowing me to come back for closing remarks. I listened to the opposition, and I never have a problem with the opposition. I really don't. It helps me to think, it helps me to process what people are saying. I think the statements by the Raiders, I thank you for the charity that you are doing in the community. I think there are a lot of organizations that have done charity, that have committed to community service. I think that's a given, just to be a good citizen, corporate citizen in Nevada, period, right? So they always have the rule that you don't get credit for what you're supposed to do. So being a good corporate citizen is just a basic. It's not personal to the Raiders. This was about tax policy and revenue policy in order to try to generate revenue for the state of Nevada. I think it's important to note that when the ticket conversation was discussed, there is no sales tax on the ticket. It is the LET for live entertainment. It's also worth mentioning that there are, I would say, majority of tourists that are paying this. We know we have local residents who go to the games and experience this experience. But this is also about fair tax policy, tax neutral policy, and trying to put some money in our general fund account for the future. And I think that's also important as well. So thanks you committee for hearing this out and for asking questions on this policy. I will continue to have conversations around revenue for the state of Nevada, whether or not it's popular or unpopular, whether or not I lose friends or gain friends. But at the end of the day, I'm always looking out for what we can do better in Nevada. If I could save every dime in Nevada for some, all of the good things that we want to do, I would. In Senate Finance, I'm usually the one who's saying, I don't really want to spend that money. I don't really want to give that money. But when we have real needs that come to the table where it's literally between whether or not someone's going to live on the street, whether or not somebody's going to be taken care of in supportive housing, whether or not somebody's going to be taken care of in emergency housing, whether or not we can actually take care of the health care of children, whether or not we can subsidize child care, whether or not we can make sure that students have materials in school, whether or not teachers get extra pay, whether or not our state employees will receive longevity pay, COLA pay, whether or not we'll be able to offset our seniors who have retired, who are in PEB, and try to offset the increased cost of their health insurance. All of these things come to the feet of the general fund. The LET goes into the general fund. And my only goal is to figure out how to stabilize the revenue in the state of Nevada, do a broad base so that we have more diversification in the revenue base so it's sustainable. So that's my goal, that's my plan. I'm probably going to keep pushing for the plan, even in my unpopularity, but I thank the committee for asking the questions that it did ask.
Thank you so much, Chair Neal. At this time, I will go ahead and close the hearing on Senate Bill 444, and we'll turn it back over to our chair.
Okay, committee, now we have work session. So we will go ahead and start with work session document SB 95, and I will turn it over to Mr. Tower. As you guys noted, hopefully you have the updated agenda. We do not have SB 140 on the agenda. We pulled it off for another day.
Thank you, Chair Neal. Christian Tower, Fiscal Analysis Division, for the record. The work session documents are available to the public on NALIS. The committee should also have it in front of them as paper copies in the binders. First document, the first bill that's going to be work session is Senate Bill 95, which provides provisions governing the excise tax on other tobacco products. The bill is sponsored by the Senate Committee on Revenue and Economic Development on behalf of the Joint Interim Standing Committee on Revenue. It was heard on March 9th, 2023. Senate Bill 95 requires the distribution of a portion of the proceeds from the tax on other tobacco products, which is currently deposited into the State General Fund, into the appropriate account of the Division of Public and Behavioral Health of the Department of Health and Human Services. The bill requires the allocation of $1.6 million of these proceeds in fiscal year 2024, increased annually by the greater of either 2% or the 5-year average percentage increase of the inflation index in fiscal year 2025 and all future fiscal years. There's no amendment proposed to this bill. And as a special note, Senate Bill 95 was determined to be eligible for exemption by the Fiscal Analysis Division on March 2nd, 2023. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tower. I know that there were some questions on SB 95. I need to add some additional things into the record before we take comment. I wanted to give comment on SB 95. So the SB 95 was an interim revenue committee bill that was going to do an allocation of $1.6 million over each year. And it was because there were ARPA dollars that were plugged into the mental health, children's mental health budget. And so I knew they were going to drop out in 26, and so the plan was to take the 1.6 million and let it accrue until 2026. It was the Northern Nevada Children's Cabinet and then the Southern Nevada Children's Cabinet that had revenue roughly around, I think it was around 3.6 million. And so the plan over the interim was to allow that money to accrue so that when the ARPA dollars dropped out, there wouldn't be a loss. And there wouldn't be a general fund ask because this money would be sitting there waiting for them in 26 so they could continue services. The conversation was had because we knew that children's mental health was a big topic while we were in COVID, and it remained a big topic after, trying to make sure that there were enough funds to continue the programming for these organizations. So that is what I want this bill to continue to do. I don't want it to be siphoned off. It was established so that it would be there for those organizations when the COVID coronavirus relief funds fell out. So I wanted to put that on the record, and now I will take any comments on SB 95. No, I think Senator Gansert has comments.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate you adding those comments, and reflecting back, I think we originally talked about earmarking some of this these dollars, but then there was some pushback on that. So I'm going to vote yes, but I'm going to reserve my right to vote no because I don't remember what those comments were. But I do, as always, support funding for children's mental health and behavioral health. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Neal. I'm going to go ahead and support today. I believe that children's mental health is definitely a need in our state.
Thank you for that. So I will entertain a motion to do pass SB 95. So I have a first from Senator Spearman, second from Senator Dunyate. Are there any questions or comments on the motion? Okay, seeing none, all in favor? Any opposed? Seeing no opposition, just a reservation to reserve the right to change the vote by Senator Gansert. The motion carries, and I will go ahead and take this floor assignment. And I will make sure to provide that backup information. I just couldn't pull it up in enough time for the work session, so you guys can have the where the money is currently going. Next, we will move to SB 126 for work session. Mr. Tower.
Thank you, Christian Tower, Fiscal Analysis Division, for the record. Senate Bill 126 revises provisions relating to the NV Grow program. The bill is sponsored by Senator DiNanio. It was heard on March 9th, 2023. Senate Bill 126 makes various changes to the NV Grow Act and the administration of the program. The bill ensures that the Division of Workforce and Economic Development of the College of Southern Nevada, to the extent practicable, establish requirements for the supervision of the lead counselor of the program by at least 2 employees of the division. It also requires, to the extent practicable, that the geographic information specialist employed by the college receives training from the Nevada Small Business Development Center in Carson City, and it requires, insofar as possible, that the program provides participants classes and resources on business development and financing. Senate Bill 126 additionally provides for the general fund appropriation of $2.1 million to the Nevada System of Higher Education to allow the college to perform certain tasks relating to the administration of the NV Grow program. A bill was proposed by Senator DiNanio. An amendment was proposed to Senate Bill 126 by Senator DiNanio. The amendment is attached to the work session document and includes various details that are not included in the summary you also find on the work session document. The proposed amendment to Section 1, subsection 2A, removes the requirement for the Nevada Small Business Development Center in Clark County to participate in the tracking and mentoring of businesses participating in the program in Clark County. Section 1, subsection 3E, is amended by deleting the word centers. Section 1, subsection 7D, adds the Las Vegas Chamber of Commerce to the group of persons interested in economic development in the state participating in the stakeholder program of the NV Grow program. And Section 2 is amended to reduce the appropriation to the College of Southern Nevada to support the NV Grow program from $2.1 million to $950,000 in each fiscal year. Special note, Senate Bill 126 was determined to be eligible for exemption by the Fiscal Analysis Division on March 14th. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions on the SB 126? Any comments? Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to thank you for bringing this forward and congratulate you on the success of the program. It's pretty phenomenal, so thank you.
Okay, with that, I will entertain a motion on SB 126 to amend and do pass. Senator, so I have a first from Senator Gansert, a second from Senator Spearman. Are there any comments or questions on the motion? Oh, okay. Second to Senator Buck. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing no opposition, the motion passes for amend and do pass for SB 126. So, Senator Buck, you want this one? All right, so Senator Buck, I will give you the floor statement on SB 126. Okay, so that completes our work session for today. We will have a couple of more. So I will open up for public comment. Is there anyone here for public comment in Carson City? Is there anyone in Vegas for public comment? No. Is there, VPS, is there anyone on the phone for public comment?
Chair, there are no callers willing to provide public comment.
Okay, so we will go ahead and adjourn Senate Committee on Revenue.